Hi there, my name's Jackson Bartlett, and today I'm going to tell you about my app, VocabuLearn. So first, I'd like you to meet James. James is 17 years old, he's a high school senior, and he lives in Los Altos, California. James really wants to get into a good college. He's motivated, but he struggles with personal organization and ADHD. In his spare time, he enjoys mountain biking and skiing with his friends, and he's also a baseball player for the school team. He's starting his last year of high school and he's feeling really overburdened. He's got a huge workload, he has college expectations, he has extracurriculars, and he has stuff he works on in his personal life. It's a really hectic time, and despite the motivation he has to succeed and do well, he finds himself needing some support. James needs a way to organize and streamline his study habits to improve his academic performance and make the best use of his time. What is the problem here? Well, James needs a way to increase his studying efficiency because he feels overwhelmed by his workload, and he wants to find ways to manage his time better and make studying easier while raising his grades. We will know this to be true when he can articulate which concepts have been giving him the most trouble and show exactly where and how he has made improvements on those topics. We believe that by creating an interface that has personalized tests, reward systems, useful metric data, and flexible but accountable self-pacing for James, we will achieve the ability to help him learn a word or concept with more ease, efficiency, and enjoyment than traditional flashcard apps. What motivates James? What are his goals, and what does he want out of something like this? Well, the things that really stood out most and that he asked for in specifics were consistent tests and applications of his knowledge. So really what that means is not only seeing flashcards and information, but also being actively tested on those in a way that's beneficial because it provides feedback and structured learning. He wants to work at his own pace, meaning that he can set his own goals and his own reminders, so he doesn't have an extra stress point in his life of a schedule he needs to keep up with that he didn't create. In addition to these, he wants to see data representations of where he's struggling most. And what this means is using the algorithm of this app and the function of this app to show what data he is consistently getting wrong, so that can be grouped together, isolated, and focused on, instead of doing an all-out attack on all of his homework and all of his reading. He also wants to be rewarded for his learning, just like everyone else does. When learning is fun, engagement happens. And so one of the things that James is looking for is a positive reward system that makes his learning fun and enjoyable. Some of the challenges that James faces personally are distractibility. It's easy to get him off task and off topic. And a good solution for that in terms of app layout would be a simple layout. No extra buttons, extra graphics, beyond basic design and functionality. Adding extra features could be distracting, and so we want to avoid that. He also has a large workload to balance. He doesn't have a lot of time. So one way to combat that is improvement data. Using data of what he's getting right and wrong and weaponizing that data so that he can be studying the things he really needs help with instead of everything. This will save him time so he can study in places like the car, the bus, the lunch period before a test, and so it opens up James's schedule for more flexibility. James struggles with self-confidence. He's in high school. It's a tough time. There's a lot of emotions and feelings happening in his life. And so it's important that people feel good. Health and the mental health of students is incredibly important. And so offering a feature that helps students feel better about learning is really important. So one thing that we can do is offer James rewards through the goals feature. That means setting goals and reminders that, when achieved, provide rewards and feedback that are good for the user and make them feel positively about their experience. One of James's other challenges is disorganization. Again, a young, bright student who struggles with attentivity and hyperactivity is naturally pretty disorganized. And so to sort of counterbalance this, he has the ability to organize his decks in the app by subject, which allows him to categorize and choose what he needs. And he can also set reminders and goals so that the phone will prompt him when he needs to do something based only on his own input. So he can set his schedule and keep himself accountable rather than being held accountable by an app that he didn't assign himself. So to test all of this, I put together some tasks. One of the first tasks that I built a user flow for was a knowledge test. Now, the way the knowledge test works is It's a test of knowledge based on everything that the user has used in a certain set of time. So the way to access the knowledge test is it can be found in the third toolbar icon of the app. And so the way to get to it as a new user would be to open the app, view the splash screen, move to the login or create account screen, move through onboarding, head to the home screen, click on the knowledge test icon, click on Do It For Me, which has since been changed to Improvement Data Test to be more understandable. And that would move him directly to the test, where he can then test himself, see feedback, and then either retest himself or return back to the testing homepage or the homepage of the app. A second task is improvement data. Improvement data is something that lives on the home screen of the app, and it shows what the user's been doing well with and not well with so that they can take that data and turn it into useful information that can help them study. So the entry point of this is obviously opening the app and going to the home screen. We're going to be looking at this as a returning user instead of a new user. So the new user would open the app, view the splash screen just the same, but then move through login and not have to do onboarding, but rather head straight to the home screen where they can open up the improvement data bubble and choose the option Add to Deck. They can either add to an existing deck or a new deck. For the purpose of this exercise, it will be creating a new deck, adding that information to this new deck, and then returning to the original screen. All right, so then we got into wireframing and prototyping. So here are my low fidelity and mid fidelity versions of certain elements of this application. So here on the left, you see a login screen. Here on the right, you see the home screen. I started with really basic functionality, recognizable elements. Obviously, the design has evolved, both through user testing and simply digitizing my prototype. And I tried to make things as clear as possible by the time we got to mid-fi. Here are two more examples. So here is an analysis of a knowledge test on the left. And on the right, you have the improvement data bubble. Obviously, it's changed a bit over time. So here is my usability test plan for the low fidelity original version of my application. My first task was to create an account as a new user and complete the onboarding process, as demonstrated below. The next task was from home, navigate to decks and back to home. I chose this because being able to easily navigate to and from decks is an extremely essential function of this application and something very relevant to James's needs. Next, again with James's needs in mind, I asked the users to, from their home screen, add improvement data to a new deck. This looks like what was described in the user flow. And again, another user flow that is being demonstrated here is from home, complete a knowledge test, and return to home. So, as I had users take the 4 of these tests, I recorded some of their observations, and often many of them were the same, and that was really useful for me. So, in the first task, everybody found onboarding confusing and busy. It wasn't specific enough, it gave them too much control and freedom to the point where they felt overwhelmed. Nobody really knew what to do, and so that was a big piece of feedback. A smaller piece of feedback from the first task was the splash screen was very unclear on whether it was clicked or would just disappear on its own. Task 2 was going to decks and back to home. Everybody found this straightforward. The icon was in the right place. The flow made sense. There were no recommended changes on my end. Task 3, improvement data was really unclear. It was a graph rather than the word improvement data, and people didn't really get enough from the visual to understand its purpose and its function. One participant suggested moving the location of the home button. However, I didn't hear from the other participants on that, so I decided to A/B test it before making final decisions. And then there were some continuity and meaning confusions in task 4. And so I made sure to address those as well. So here are some of the fixes I actually made. I changed the splash screen to have a really simple, just tap to enter so people know that they're going into the app and that they can actually do an actionable on that screen. I also made an onboarding that was in-depth and detailed but not too long, with the option to skip, where it really highlights each feature individually so that users don't feel like they're not being guided through the process. 3 more fixes that I made were I clearly labeled my improvement data. I made it simple so that it's not ambiguous about what it actually is or does. I changed meanings of words and iterations of words to be exactly the same for continuity purposes. And I changed a term that I was using called do it for me to something that is now improvement data test, because it fits more into the lines of what the app has already talked about, so users have more familiarity with that term. So based on my first round of testing and the feedback I got on that initial prototype that was drawn by hand, I implemented these changes and updated and digitized the whole thing, and that gave me my mid-fi. So this is what it looked like next. This is the same exact set of steps, and it's now the same screens, just updated. Feedback has been added and they've been prettied up a little bit. So what comes next? Well, I would do a second and third round of usability testing. I would reiterate that mid-fi prototype and ideally move to a higher fidelity prototype. Through this process, I've realized that UI is really important, so that would also come next, making it pretty and fun and nice to look at and use. I would A/B test the home button location because that was feedback I got from a single user, so I want to find out if that resonates with other people. Currently, with the prototyping app that I've been using, you can't scroll forward and back on the same location, so you can only move forward through onboarding, which I would like to fix. And then obviously I would like to wireframe, prototype, and build out and test the rest of the app that I haven't shown in this presentation. And so, just kind of in summary, some things that I learned a bit from this just about building, prototyping, and the whole design process are wireframing by hand takes forever. It was a huge amount of time and stress and energy for me. I'm sure more people have steady hands and faster drawing and cleaner drawings, but it just didn't really resonate with me because I couldn't really visualize what I was drawing very well. So moving to a digital version really helped me take creative control. I also learned to design with empathy. I really tried to look at what the issue being solved is and actually address that instead of just seeing it as a series of unrelated steps. Test early, test often. That's a huge one. I really think that if you're ever unsure, test. You don't have to be the wellspring of creativity for this. You can seek your participants and basically ask people what they're looking for, and it should always come from feedback. So keep testing down to the micro and the minutia, because that will really give you the best product that's serving an actual need. Be super organized about file naming and organization. You're going to be digging and saving a lot, so do yourself a favor and know when and where everything is. Organize your user flows logically and simply. I got into a whole bird's nest of organization that just didn't work out. It was confusing. It logically made sense, but it was a little bit too haphazard to really understand where everything fit. Less is more, pretty much always. The more you can say with less words, the more it's going to impact your audience and the more it's going to mean to them because they're engaged. Engagement drops away really quickly, so the more you can impart in less words and less text and less visual is really, really important. Learn UI. To be a designer, I think you're almost expected to have some visual design skills, so I think it's really important to brush up on those and have at least a basic knowledge of how to make things visually appealing. And finally, and it's big for a reason, I made it big, I wrote it long because it's important, listen to your interviewees. Let them talk and let them go past the nature of the question, because often the best answers come organically when you allow them to go off script. People love to talk. They love to talk about themselves, and so the more opportunity you give them to open up, the more that they're going to give you that you weren't even looking for. And that's where a lot of the real meat comes from anyway. So really be diligent in being respectful and letting your people talk. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that this was meaningful and is understandable. And I really hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you.